And of course, to say the least, I was awful busy on the farm. I didn't have time to go checking on things. And if I hadn't been busy, I suppose I wouldn't have been deferred in the draft. They didn't let anybody stay home just for safety's sake. They stayed home for a reason.
During the time of the Great Depression and into the 1930s, America was facing major problems. Things like poverty and the Dust Bowl were making life in America unpredictable and harsh. People did not know what to do, and with war on the horizon, some people did not know exactly where to turn. A lot of the men in the United States were drafted to the war, and others enlisted just to serve their country. But people like Donald Ellingson chose to stay home and support their country on the home front.
We were dairy farmers, so I helped take care of calves, milk cows, and such things. And of course, in '34, we were farming with horses and tractors.
Throughout the 1930s, the demand for agriculture products was continuously on the rise, but the Great Depression had crippled some farmers of all of their land. However, how some people were struggling, other farmers had flourished. Donald Ellingson's father was one of those people.
During the Depression, my father, who was a dairy farmer, bought some land just west of Poplar Grove, and he built a new barn on it, and it was the smartest thing he ever did, because he said that he thought things would never be cheaper, and that was right. That was '33. He built a barn today, I don't know how many thousand. It was $3,000 for everything, a big barn. Today, couldn't build it for $100,000.
With everything going on in the world during the 1930s, knowing about everything was definitely tough. However, the radio was making it more possible than ever to get news when it was still news. Things like FDR's fireside chats made it possible for everyone in America to stay up to date on what was occurring worldwide.
Everybody had radios. We had a radio in our barn. When we milked cows, we could listen to the radio. You got everything by it. We had radio in your car. You'd listen to it all the time. You know, everything was radio. And news didn't travel as fast as today, but it was pretty fast radio.
As World War II started to take off, America was preparing for its potential involvement. Rationing had played a major part in our victory in the war, and people just understood that they had to do without. However, being a producer of foods and other resources for the war effort, rationing had a much lighter toll on the farmers.
For farm, you were producing food for the nation and for the army, and most anything you needed, you got. For example, if you needed tires, you'd get them. You need gasoline for your tractors and that, you know. It was I guess you'd say, a pretty important place, but also a lucky place to be. You didn't suffer much. I mean, groceries, sure, but groceries aren't the big item. You could always get plenty to eat. It's just you might not get the specific item you wanted, but it was not a problem.
December 7th, 1941. Tragedy strikes. Japanese planes bomb Pearl Harbor and plunge America into the fray of World War II.
As boys from not only our area, from the whole nation, were going into service, why there became quite a shortage of help on farms. I was on the farm. Actually, I graduated from high school in '41, so as soon as the war was started, I was home on the farm helping my dad.
Unlike Donald, his brother Joelbert did not stay home to help on the farm. He instead became a member of the United States Air Force.
He was in college. He went into service in '43. He got halfway through his college career and then went into service in the Air Force.
Although it was important for men of the United States to become enlisted soldiers, staying on the home front was a major contribution to the war effort. This was not always an easy process, contrary to what some would want to believe. There arose complications, most along the lines of why would someone want to stay home as opposed to go and joining the fight. Many people opted for deferment, however, this was not always an easy situation. Although this process for some was strenuous and did not always work, for people that had to stay home and help with things such as farm life, it was a much less daunting task.
My brother was in the Air Force. I went to take the Air Force exam, and I passed the written test fine. And they said, when can you take the physical? And I said, well, gee, I don't know. And they said, well, call and then come back. Well, I never went back for the simple reason that my dad said, well, if you're going in the Air Force too, I'm going to have to sell out. And, it didn't really lock me in, but it was sort of pressure. And I never went into service. And I was one of the few young people that was on a farm at that time because most of them were in service. But as far as the deferment, it was a piece of cake because the farms needed the labor force. I guess if you were essential for the home, whether it was farming or whatever, there were a few deferments, but they were more or less uncommon.
During the start of the war, the amount of people leaving the farms to go fight was taking away most of the farmhands in the nation. But of course, America had a quick remedy to the situation. They recruited volunteer high school students to come work on the farms during the summer. It was a fast and very effective solution to the problem. These high school students were referred to as Victory Farm Volunteers.
That was the title referred to them as Victory Farm Volunteers. And they were on the farm. They were divided into 3 groups when they got to the farm. And one group was learning how to clean barns. It was pitching manure out of the gutter into a manure spreader in the barn. Some others were planting potatoes. And the third group was building fence. And that was all on our farm, and they spent the forenoon there. And the afternoon they went to a couple other places south of Belvedere, but it was all Boone County. They were volunteered to do it, but they got paid for doing it, yes. As far as I know, all of them got paid because I don't think any would have stayed with just for the fun of working, because sometimes working isn't fun. But you need to be rewarded, yes.
As big a part the Victory Farm Volunteers were to help the farms in the nation, the government also had another trick up their sleeve. During World War II, similar to other countries, America also kept prisoners of war, and in the heart of the country it was mostly German soldiers. Although they were kept as prisoners of war, German POWs were often treated vastly differently than American POWs in other countries. In foreign countries, American POWs' living conditions were more often than not worse than the animals kept there. Americans would be tortured daily, fed scraps of what would seem garbage, and pushed to the brink of death. However, German POWs in America were far more fortunate. This was because FDR wanted to project on other nations that even though these men were prisoners of war, they were still people. Most of these German POWs were located at farms in Middle America.
They were supervised. They weren't loose. But I think, in my opinion, they didn't need much supervision because they were so glad they're not being shot at, and here in a safe place and good food, and the prisoners of war in this country were treated mighty good, not like they were in Germany, and of course in Japan there basically weren't any. They would kill them instead of take them prisoner. But well, you've all heard war is hell, and there's no doubt that's true.
In January of 1942 and March of 1942, the Japanese had captured the rubber-supplying nations of Malaya and the Dutch East Indies. This respectively eliminated around 91% of America's rubber supply. This only made tire rationing a much more stressed implication and reminded America the severity of keeping up with rationing. However, there were a few exceptions.
And I went into the tire place, and they said, well, what's your reason you need tires? I said, to go on our honeymoon. They said, that's the best reason we've had, we get too tired. So I didn't plan it was going to be that easy to get the tires, but I went to get the tires, and I luckily got them in a hurry.
During the height of the war, families around America had to sit at home and wonder how their relatives were faring overseas. Some emotions were fear for their loved ones, others were hopeful for their return home. Although every major event in the war gave each mother and wife anxiety, on December 16th of 1944, the Battle of the Bulge would be one of the most significant events in World War II. This event changed Donald Ellingson's life forever.
It was during the Battle of the Bulge, and they were trying to give the air support to the Battle of the Bulge. It was January 1 of 45, and it was a icy runway and foggy besides, ice and fog, and they still sent him up. He was a co-pilot on the B-24 bomber, and they were stationed in England, and they were bombing Europe, Germany, and such places. And they had, he and the crew were evidently good enough that they were lead plane on the bomber squadron. And ordinarily, you get furloughed to come home with 25 missions. But since they were lead plane, they were come home with 20 missions. And my brother was killed on his 19th mission. And when he was killed, we got the telegram, and my dad, I don't know what kind of an attack he had, but he had some kind of attack. He wasn't able to work, and I had to do it all by myself then, and it was a load, except I came to one conclusion. When you have a problem like a death that weighs on you, if you have a lot of work to do and work, it makes it better, really. I was too busy to spend much time pining, I guess you'd say, but at night I did some terrible dreaming as a result. But it was my only kinship. I only had one brother, no sisters, so it was just me left after he was killed, and I was farming, and basically still am today. I mean, we sold our milk cows 9th of January, so they've been a dairy farm almost forever, but not today.
Throughout World War II, there were many losses and many gains. A lot of the people had to make it through hardships that they did not think possible at some points. Whether it be the loss of possessions or the loss of one's family, everyone suffered. But also everybody worked, and that's what kept America going. There were times of doubt in the minds of all Americans, but their perseverance had never faltered. Whether it be in factories or on the farms or every brave soldier fighting overseas, we did it. Here are a few words from Donald Ellingson to pass to the generations now and to come.
I think I had a couple simple things. Work hard, which was a common thing once upon a time, and be thrifty and saving. But one other thing I want to point out too, from the good old days till today, the biggest thing is honesty. When I was a kid, and for quite a few years after that, you could go to your neighbor, borrow anything you want, whether they're home or not, tell them about it later. Today, you don't go to your neighbors unless they're home. You don't dare. And that has something to do with honesty. I think back today of some of the work I did, and I can't imagine I worked that hard, because I'm not working that hard today. But I still do quite a bit of work on the farm, but I can do it sitting in the tractor.
the documentary you all just watched. So I'm going to start off with telling you about how I kind of got interested in the class. So at the end of my junior year, some of my senior friends came to me and were like, this vet doc class is awesome. You need to take it, everything's going to be cool, you're going to love it. So I said, okay, why not? It sounded kind of neat. You get to pick a veteran, you get to kind of tell their story through how you want to tell it and showcase what they went through. So I thought, it's interesting, I'll do it. So coming in the first week of the class, everything was really relaxed. Like the time crunch that I heard about and all that didn't seem evident. Like there wasn't anything that I had to be really worried about at the time. So it seemed really like, okay, this is awesome. Like I don't really have to do anything right now. It's cool. But then came the week when we got to pick our veterans. And for the teachers and the people that had been in the class before their junior year, this seemed like a really, really big deal. And I didn't quite understand that yet, but I thought, okay, I'll get excited too, why not? So everyone picked their veteran and I got pretty early pick order, and home front kind of sounded interesting to me because everyone's going to be doing stories about the war, but I kind of wanted to take a look through the eyes of someone that had to stay here during World War II. So Don's description, it was just home front, farmer, I think something that he had stories about German prisoners of war at a certain point. And so I was like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. I'll do that. That sounds right up my alley. I want to do that. So everything still is very, very relaxed. Like nothing's really going on, no time crunches yet. Everything's cool. I'm having a good time. Then we sit down for the first time to watch our raw footage. I don't know what to expect. I didn't get to sit in on Don's interview. I don't know who he is as a person, and I just really didn't know how to come at this. So I sat down and I watched it, and at first it was interesting. It didn't really catch my immediate attention due to the fact that I really didn't understand what I was doing totally yet. So, I sat through it and I was like, okay, I can do this. This seems really cool. And so just the weeks go on, and I would just sit and cut his raw footage and see what I could do with it, try to make a documentary. That's what we do, we make documentaries. And so just the weeks go on, and I'm lost. I don't know what direction to take it. It's really not giving me anything. Everything in the material is interesting. I know directions I want to go, but I don't know how to get there. And it's scary. It just makes you realize that, hey, this isn't just a blow-off class in my senior year. I need to put some work towards this, or it's not going to be as good as I want it to be, or as good as Don deserves it to be. So, start of the year, it was so slow for me. I just, couldn't find motivation to get things done, couldn't find the drive. But then, end of the first semester hit, and it started to kind of click. I started to come in after school, I started to come in on weekends, and the gear started going. I started to look at the screen and realize oh, I can do this here and do that there. And Don's story started to become very real to me. I started to understand a lot of the things that he must have experienced and knew how those things happened, when they happened, and how I could convey the message of those things. And so mid-year, everything started to go, and it just kept turning and turning and turning. And then we got to the start of second semester, and I realized that I was a little bit behind in my documentary, it was scary. And, I obviously to an outside person, maybe a little bit disappointing, but, I knew inside I could get it done, and I knew I could make it good. And so I just crunched and I crunched and I crunched, and started to get to February, and I came in for interviews to help with interviews. I led an interview, and it just started to accelerate so quickly my just interest in the class. Not that I wasn't interested in it before, but now I was a part of Vet Doc. I wasn't just some kid that, picked a veteran and now he's trying to make a documentary. I'm one of the kids that comes in, not during school, does what they have to do and gets things done. It's awesome. It's awesome to see how you can transform raw footage into a story about what people experience throughout their life. And that's wonderful to me. And I'm sure Don is going to be incredibly proud of what I did, and he's probably watching this right now, so hey Don, I'm Will, obviously you know that now. But it's just incredible how towards the end of the year you start to feel a connection with this person that you're doing a documentary for, and how you start to understand, like, okay, he's talking about how they worked really hard, everyone worked, it was nonstop work, and that's why their generation got through what they did. So why can't I work, come in after school, come in on weekends, nonstop work, so that I can make something that's worthy of him being proud of? And it just, inside, it's just something that kind of awakens in you that you really, really need to do. And I feel as if it hit me a little later than other people, but it hit me and it hit me really hard. And I crunched a lot. Like, you would not believe how much I got done in the time span that I did and made it the quality I did at that certain point. And it was awesome. It was just so stressful and so hard and so, oh my God, why am I doing this? But would I do it again? Absolutely, because it was, now being done with it, finally one of the best feelings I've ever had. Knowing that someone's gonna watch this and be proud of it. And obviously outside teacher motivation, everyone else motivated me, hey, you can get this done. But what really motivated me was coming in every single day and looking at Don and knowing that he's gonna be proud of what I do. So ultimately, I can thank myself, I can thank the teachers, but you were the one that motivated me, Don. So thank you. Thank you so much for helping me through this.